Hey, what is going on, guys? What's happening, YouTube? I'm Johnny. You've tuned into Rules for Rebels, and today we're talking about Bitcoin. So I'm not really sure what my aim for this video is. I guess it's kind of just to kind of bring everybody back down to earth and make sure people kind of keep a healthy respect for money. I've noticed recently a lot of people seem to act like because Bitcoin's on this big run, because cryptocurrencies are doing really well, that's always going to happen forever. And it's not necessarily the case, right? Past performance does not necessarily indicate future performance. What's happened in the past doesn't always continue on forward. And the reason I wanted to make this video, I've heard a couple people close to me making comments that kind of show the lack of a healthy respect for money. And also, I thought it was kind of interesting, like, is cryptocurrency destroying our expectations for reasonable investment gains? Well, what's kind of funny is prior to cryptocurrency being around, if someone made 8, 10, 12% a year in investments, like people would be through the roof for that. However, now that people are making like 3,000% in a day, now that people are seeing like 10x returns within a couple of months with some of these cryptocurrencies, I see a lot of people kind of turning their noses up at modest investment gains. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. Maybe try to bring everybody back down to earth a little bit. I've been seeing a lot of comments on Reddit and other forums about like, oh, Bitcoin went from 2,500 to 5 grand. So that means if I put my money in at 5 grand, it's going to go to 10K and I'm going to double up. And well, it's looking like that's the direction things are going to happen. There's no guarantees. None of us know what the future holds. Got a couple quick stories to share with you guys. So first, recently, within the past couple weeks, I gave a buddy of mine's really into cryptos, and we kind of swapped crypto tips and things like that, coin tips, etc. And I had told him about an opportunity that I saw that was pretty much guaranteed to make you like a 30-40% return, probably within a week or two, maybe a month tops. And it was kind of funny. My buddy kind of snubbed his nose at it, and he was like, 30%, 30%. He said, what's 30%? I'm looking for those 20x gains. I'm looking for those 50x gains. And, the idea that everybody's going to be making 20x, 30x, 50x is kind of crazy in my mind. I mean, it is happening. People are making that kind of money, but like the expectation that that's a norm is just insane to me. And more recently, I was talking with my dad. And my dad hasn't really been in the crypto space for a while. I got him his first Bitcoin probably within the past month or 6 weeks. And he recently retired, so now he's substitute teaching. So he has pretty much all day long to just kind of cruise on his phone while the students are doing worksheets and whatever else. So he's been reading a lot into crypto and things like that. And the other day, my dad's a very kind of even-tempered, very kind of cautious guy. And the other day, it's kind of funny, when I bought him his Bitcoin when it was at 4,500, I actually got it for him for $200 or $300 under value. So I actually got it for 42 or 4,300. I have a buddy who has like a gaming site that accepts crypto, so he'll oftentimes sell me Bitcoins for under value. But anyhow, I got it for my dad, a couple $100 under value. Shortly after that, Bitcoin tanked down to what, 32, 3,300. And my dad was like, "Oh man, what'd you get me into?" And then it rocketed up, and obviously now he's sitting up probably $2 grand, $2,500, something like that. But my dad made a comment the other day, kind of like, well, I'm kind of too late to the Bitcoin party. He's like, okay, I get in at 5, it goes to 10, big whoop, I made $5,000. And he kind of caught himself, and he was like, don't get me wrong, $5,000 is a lot of money, but he was kind of realizing that, like, if you're wanting to be a story like these guys who invested $100 and became millionaires, you're going to have to take on more risk and get into a lot of the other altcoins, which are a lot more uncertain, which carry a lot more risk, etc. So I think my dad's point was kind of like, it didn't seem like that much money, and I think my dad kind of caught himself kind of falling into that hype. So I guess basically what I wanted to make this video about is just have a respect for money. If you're up a couple $1,000s on Bitcoin, if you make 30 grand a year, 50 grand a year, think about how many hours you would have to work to make that amount of money. Maybe you've made $10,000 on Bitcoin. How many hours would you have to work at your day job to make $10,000? And when you start realizing that potentially could be months worth of work for you, I think it starts putting it into perspective. And I'm not telling people to cash out of Bitcoin. I'm not telling people to sell out, but just kind of, don't allow yourself to get caught up in this hype and kind of reevaluate your situation. So I'm actually thinking about taking some profits out of Bitcoin. I kind of did a stupid move the other day. So most of my Bitcoin's on my Trezor. And what's kind of nice about that, it makes it harder for me to trade, right? Like if I want to trade it, I have to send it over to Coinbase, which, I have to dig my Trezor out of its secure location. I have to log into my Trezor. I have to send it over to Coinbase. Then I have to wait for that money to clear the pending status and get all the confirmations to trade it. And sometimes by the time that happens, if Bitcoin's on a run, it's maybe pulled back a couple $100 and it's not as attractive to do that. So anyhow, recently I think I had 12 or $1,500 sitting in Coinbase. This is before we hit $7,000 and everything, but Bitcoin had run up to maybe 54, 5,500. And I was kind of expecting a pullback to $5,000, 4,900. So I was like, you know what? It's just a little bit. I'm not affecting the majority of my holdings. I'm going to sell off, take a couple $100 profit, wait for it to pull back, buy back in, and lock in a little bit more profits, earn myself a little bit of extra Bitcoin. And as we saw, Bitcoin just ran and ran and ran. And as I'm making this video right now, let's see what Bitcoin's sitting at. Okay, so as I'm making this video right now, Bitcoin's sitting at about 7170. In the past 24 hours, it's been down as low as 7,027, as high as 7,594. But yeah, my point here is just, it's easy to get caught up in the hype. If you're, unless you got in within the past 2 weeks, you're probably sitting on a couple $1,000s worth of profit. If you got in more than a couple months ago, you probably got in at $2,000, $3,000, if not even lower than that. So you're sitting on a lot of profits right now. We're going into this fork. There's a lot of uncertainty. What's kind of funny, normally I would think after a fork that money's going to rush into Bitcoin because all the FUD is gone, all the fear, uncertainty, and doubt is gone. Bitcoin survived another fork and it's stronger than ever. But with this fork, and really ever since Bitcoin Cash, it seems like there's actually more optimism and enthusiasm going into a fork over free coins than there is fear. So I think we may actually be seeing a lot of money flooding into Bitcoin right now, and we may see a lot of that money pull out either just before the fork if some people get nervous, or even after the fork, after people collect their quote-unquote free coins. I know a lot of people have been saying that money's going to flood back into alts. Well, I would love to see that happen, as I'm sitting in a lot of alts and have been kind of dollar cost averaging into them for the past few weeks. I actually probably started buying in too early. I really don't think we're going to see money flood back into alts. I mean, could we see alts, make some decent gains and gain back some of the ground they lost? Sure. But I personally don't see, with the exception of maybe one or two, I don't see money like flooding back into alts. So I'm still kind of doing my dollar cost averaging, but I'm not really like dumping my money back into alts. But I guess kind of the main focus of this video and kind of the question I had is like I invest in Vanguard index funds as well. And in those, if you can make 8, 10, 12% a year, that's pretty fantastic. And I kind of have a feeling that especially this new generation who's kind of just getting into investing for the first time, people are going to start kind of losing a healthy respect for money and kind of getting the idea into their head that it's possible to make 10x, 20x, 30x, 50x, 3,000% on your money, etc. And we're in a very, very unique time right now. There's a lot of opportunities. I'm not telling anybody not to invest in crypto. That's kind of the reason that I got into crypto, is that I think this time period we're in right now is somewhat like the dot-com bubble, in the sense that this is probably the best time in history. This gives the average Joe like you and me the best chance at essentially becoming an overnight millionaire. But that's not to say that there's no risk. That's not to say that maybe you shouldn't be even-tempered and have a healthy respect for money and pull out some profits along the way. A question that I think people should ask themselves: if Bitcoin went to $1,000 today, would you be devastated? And I know a lot of people say, well, I only invest what I can afford to lose, so it's not going to devastate me. I'm not going to be bankrupt. That's besides the point. If you invested $2,000 into crypto and you now have $50,000 in the bank, even though you're quote unquote playing with the house's money, at this point, that's your money. You could potentially cash that out and have $50,000 to put a down payment on a house, buy a car, put into retirement, pay for your kids' college fund. So just because you're playing with the house's money doesn't mean that that's not real money that could be in your pocket. And I guess I just kind of encourage people to kind of be tempered, take a step back. Again, I'm not telling you to sell. I'm just telling you to evaluate your position. If Bitcoin went to $1,000 tomorrow, very, very unlikely, right? But if it did, would you be kicking yourself for not taking some profits along the way? So I'm thinking that I may sell off one Bitcoin just to lock in some profits that will pretty much cover. I want to say I'll pretty much be back to even in terms of what I put in terms of my own money. And I'm still sitting on a lot of Litecoin, a lot of Ether, not even close to the point where I'm considering selling that. The only point at which I might sell my Bitcoin prior to the fork is if we continue to see a run up. So if Bitcoin breaks 8 grand, I would be expecting a pullback because I think we've just risen too high too fast. And if Bitcoin cracks 8 grand, I think it might even go up to 8,800 before the fork. I will probably sell off, not majority, not even a good percentage, but I'll probably sell off a Bitcoin or two because I would expect a pullback after that. And I'm not even scared about selling off before SegWit 2. Because I think I think SegWit 2 may break down and wind up employing replay protection at the last minute, because otherwise I think one of the two coins is going to die out. At least if they employ replay protection, they become an altcoin and there's still some value. So I think they may at the last minute employ replay protection. And I really don't, if we see Bitcoin rise up to like 8 grand and then pull back to 5 or 6, I think that $2,000 or $3,000 profit that you lock in by selling at the potential peak is going to outweigh whatever a potential SegWit 2x altcoin might be worth. And potentially, if Bitcoin crashes or pulls back just prior to the fork, you may even be able to lock in your profits, put some money on the sidelines, and then buy back in at an even cheaper price and still collect your SegWit 2x coins, which would just kind of be icing on the cake. But yeah, I'm kind of curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you guys see your friends, family, Bitcoiners in general on subreddits and things like that? Do you see people kind of losing a healthy respect for money? I got to bring it back to the thing of however much money you're up on crypto right now, think about how long you would have to work at your day job to make that. And I think that may make you think a little bit harder about things. I've kind of rambled on longer than I expected, but one other thing I wanted to add, I think this kind of losing respect for money and normal, reasonable investment gains is also what's causing people to go into programs like BitConnect and Laser and ETHConnect and all these other things, high yield investment programs, right? Normally people wouldn't do that type of stuff. Oh, if it sounds too good to be true, it's a scam. Oh, this just seems too shady. But everyone's, so, like the guy in the picture here, everyone's so crazy-eyed about all the potential money there is to be made that I think people are putting common sense on the sidelines and maybe doing some risky things that they may not normally do. So keep in mind, whatever crypto gains you're sitting on, even though you may be playing with the house's money, at this point, that is your money. You may want to consider locking in some profits. I'm curious to hear what you guys think is going to happen, like leading up to and after the fork. Again, traditionally in the past, when forks didn't even happen, but when there was even talk about a fork, we'd see a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, a lot of FUD in the marketplace, and we'd see the price going all over the place, right? We'd see it tanking, and then when it got to the point where it was like a good buy, we'd see people buying back in and it'd rush up, and then it'd get too high, and people get nervous again and pull out. And Bitcoin Cash, it was kind of interesting. I kind of expected things to get kind of volatile and drop before the fork. We actually just saw things kind of trade sideways, and then it continued to rise after the fork. The Bitcoin Gold thing was kind of a non-issue. That wasn't really a big deal. But going into this fork, it seems like people are more optimistic, more kind of gung-ho, crazy-eyed about collecting their free money than they are like fearful about any of this stuff. I personally don't really know which way it'll go. I could see it rising after the fork because, the uncertainty is gone. I could see it falling after the fork because all this money rushed into Bitcoin optimistically wanting to get their free money before the fork, and then everybody selling off and taking profits. Or I could see it being kind of like Bitcoin Cash and just trading sideways. Quite honestly, I'm not sure which way it's going to go. But the one thing, I think I actually picked up this tip from BTC Kyle. But if we see Bitcoin continue to rise at a very, very fast pace, we had a really fast run up from like 5 grand, 5,400 to 7,500, 7,600. So if we see another run up like that to 8 grand, 8,800, I think that's just too much, too fast. I think we're destined for a little bit of a pullback there, and I'm probably going to sell off, take some profits, and sit in the sidelines and see what happens with us going into the fork. But as always, I'm curious to hear your guys' predictions, opinions, what you think is going to happen, any upcoming news that you've heard about, etc. Drop it in the comments section below. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you're not subscribed, and we'll catch you on the next one.